C'est à la fois très agréable, je vais vous dire qu'en plus, j'ai pas été prévenue, donc ça a été une surprise. J'ai pas eu à le demander.
Catherine Deneuve was not just an actress. She became a face that defined an era, a presence that felt eternal, and a mystery that cinema itself seemed unable to fully explain. To audiences around the world, she appeared flawless, composed, and distant, like a living sculpture carved out of light and shadow. But behind that elegance lived a woman who learned very early that beauty can be both a blessing and a prison. When people speak of Catherine Deneuve, they often speak in absolutes. The most beautiful woman in cinema, the embodiment of French elegance, the cool blonde who never revealed too much. Her face, framed by perfect symmetry and calm restraint, became inseparable from European art cinema itself. From the moment she appeared in the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, drenched in pastel colors and heartbreak, she was no longer just a performer. She was a symbol of longing, restraint, and quiet suffering. Yet symbols are rarely allowed to be human. For decades, the world admired her from a distance. Critics praised her discipline. Directors shaped entire films around her stillness. Designers dressed her as if she were untouchable. But few stopped to ask what it costs a person to live inside an image so powerful that it erases the person beneath it. What does it mean to be adored without being understood? To be seen by millions, yet known by almost no one? Catherine Deneuve's story is not loud. It does not announce itself with scandal or spectacle. It unfolds slowly, in silences, in choices made quietly, and in emotions carefully guarded. It is the story of a woman who learned to survive by controlling what the world could see, even if it meant hiding parts of herself forever. She lived through the rise of modern cinema, through revolutions in art and politics, through love affairs that shaped headlines and heartbreaks that never did. She worked with the greatest directors of her time, yet never allowed herself to belong fully to any movement, any ideology, or any expectation placed upon her. Independence became her shield. Distance became her armor. And yet, beneath that composure, there was vulnerability. There was fear of being reduced to an object, fear of being loved only for what she represented, not for who she was. Fear that once the image faded, nothing would remain. This documentary is not about perfection. It is about the woman behind it. It is about a young girl born into a world of performers who learned early how fragile applause can be. It is about a teenager thrust into fame before she understood herself. It is about an actress who spent a lifetime balancing strength and solitude, desire and restraint, visibility and privacy. Catherine Deneuve's story asks a quiet but devastating question. What happens when the world falls in love with your image but never gives you permission to change it? Her story is one of beauty, yes, but also of control, of freedom won at a cost, of silence chosen over explanation, and of a woman who remained standing long after the lights dimmed, still watching the world from behind her carefully constructed calm. This is not just the story of a cinema icon. It is the story of a woman who refused to be consumed by her own legend. And behind the elegance, behind the fame, behind the unshakable composure, lies a life shaped by restraint, resilience, and a quiet loneliness that few ever noticed. Early life and family background. Catherine Deneuve was born on October 22, 1943, in Paris, into a family where performance was not an ambition but a way of life. Her arrival came during a time of fear and uncertainty, when Europe was still torn by war and survival shaped every ordinary day. Even before she could understand the world, that world was already unstable, demanding strength before innocence had time to exist. Her parents were both actors, Maurice d'Orléac and Renée Simoneau, respected figures of the French stage and screen.
The house Catherine grew up in was filled with scripts, rehearsals, whispered lines, and the unspoken pressure of living up to a legacy that did not ask for permission. Acting was not introduced to her as a dream. It was simply there, woven into daily life, unavoidable and quietly demanding. Yet her childhood was not wrapped in warmth or emotional safety. Fame does not protect families from distance, and performance does not guarantee connection. Her parents separated when she was young, leaving behind a household shaped by absence and adjustment. Catherine learned early that stability could vanish without warning. Love could exist, but it could also leave. She was one of 4 sisters, including Françoise d'Orléac, who would later become her closest emotional mirror and her deepest heartbreak. Françoise was vibrant, spontaneous, full of fire. Catherine, by contrast, was quieter, more reserved, watching rather than rushing forward. From an early age, she understood that being noticed was not always the same as being seen. Her mother, a strong and disciplined woman, believed in professionalism above comfort. Emotions were not encouraged to spill freely. Sensitivity was something to be managed, not indulged. Catherine absorbed this lesson deeply. She learned how to listen without speaking, how to observe without revealing, how to protect herself by remaining composed. This emotional restraint would later become one of her greatest strengths on screen, but it was born out of necessity, not choice. School offered little refuge. Catherine was not particularly interested in academic life, nor did she feel a sense of belonging among classmates who could not understand her world. While other children dreamed of ordinary futures, her path felt quietly predetermined. She did not rebel against it. She accepted it with a calm that masked uncertainty. Even as a child, she possessed an unusual seriousness. There was something distant in her gaze, something reflective and cautious. Adults noticed it. Directors would later describe it as maturity beyond her years. But that maturity came from learning too soon that vulnerability had consequences. Her first experiences on film came almost casually, introduced by her older sister and supported by her mother. There was no dramatic declaration, no moment of realization. Acting slipped into her life the way responsibility often does for children raised too fast. She did not yet understand what it would demand of her, only that it felt familiar and strangely safe. At home, affection existed, but it was measured. Praise was rare. Expectations were clear. Catherine learned to define herself not through reassurance, but through discipline. She became self-contained, careful with words, protective of her inner world. These habits did not fade with time. They became her foundation. Her early life shaped a woman who would later appear untouchable, but that distance was built slowly, piece by piece, as a way to survive emotional uncertainty. The silence she carried was not emptiness, it was self-preservation. By the time she stepped fully into adolescence, Catherine Deneuve had already learned one of the hardest lessons life can teach, that beauty does not guarantee safety, that talent does not protect the heart, and that sometimes the only way to move forward is to keep parts of yourself hidden, even from those closest to you. This was the emotional ground on which her future would be built, quiet, controlled, and carrying more weight than anyone realized.
Catherine Deneuve did not step into acting with the hunger of someone chasing escape. She entered it almost cautiously, as if testing the ground beneath her feet, unsure whether it would hold her weight. While others burned with ambition, Catherine moved forward quietly, shaped by observation rather than confidence. Her earliest steps were not triumphant. They were tentative, restrained, and deeply human. Her first film appearances in the late 1950s came when she was still a teenager, cast in small roles that asked little of her beyond presence. She was young, beautiful, and visibly composed, but beneath that surface was a girl still trying to understand who she was and whether this path truly belonged to her. She was not immediately praised as extraordinary. In fact, many early critics found her distant, even cold.
What they mistook for lack of emotion was actually fear of exposure. Unlike actors who trained extensively or declared their purpose early, Catherine learned by doing, often in silence. She absorbed the mechanics of filmmaking without demanding attention. On set, she watched more than she spoke. She listened to directors, studied the rhythms of scenes, and learned how stillness could speak louder than movement. But this learning process came with uncertainty. She worried whether her reserved nature was a weakness in an industry that rewarded expressiveness and charm. At home, encouragement was subtle rather than enthusiastic. Acting was familiar territory for her family, which meant success was not celebrated loudly and failure was not dramatized. This environment left Catherine largely alone with her doubts. There were no speeches about believing in herself. There was only the quiet expectation that she would either endure or step aside. Her early roles did not bring immediate recognition. She appeared in light comedies and modest productions, films that passed through theaters without leaving much trace. For a time, she wondered if this would be her fate, to be present but not remembered, to work steadily but never deeply. There were moments when she considered whether she lacked the fire needed to truly succeed. What made these years particularly difficult was comparison. Her sister, Françoise d'Orléac, was rising quickly, praised for her energy, humor, and spontaneity. Françoise seemed effortless on screen, adored by audiences and filmmakers alike. Catherine loved her sister deeply, but admiration was often tangled with quiet insecurity. Standing beside Françoise, Catherine felt slower, heavier, less alive. She questioned whether she was meant to follow in the same footsteps or carve a different path entirely. Casting directors often saw her beauty before they saw her potential. She was offered roles that emphasized appearance rather than depth, characters designed to be admired rather than understood. Catherine accepted them, but she felt restless. She sensed there was something inside her that had not yet been allowed to surface, something unspoken, restrained, waiting for the right space. There were setbacks that never made headlines, auditions that led nowhere, roles lost to actresses who fit expectations more comfortably, moments when she felt invisible in rooms full of decision-makers. She did not protest, she withdrew. Each disappointment pushed her further inward, reinforcing the belief that silence was safer than resistance. Yet during this uncertain period, something important was forming. Catherine was learning patience. She was learning how to endure being underestimated. She was learning how to hold emotion beneath the surface, letting it simmer rather than spill. These were not glamorous lessons, but they were powerful ones. Her breakthrough did not arrive because she forced herself forward. It came because she remained still long enough for the right moment to find her. But before that moment arrived, there were years of doubt, quiet perseverance, and emotional restraint. Years when she questioned whether she belonged in front of the camera at all. What kept her going was not ambition, but instinct, a quiet understanding that she had not yet shown her true face, that the distance people saw was not emptiness, but depth waiting for permission. These early struggles did not break Catherine Deneuve. They shaped her. They taught her how to survive an industry that rarely waits. And when the time finally came for the world to truly see her, she would not arrive loudly or dramatically. She would arrive fully formed, carrying with her every doubt she had endured in silence. Breakthrough moment. Everything changed, not in a burst of noise, but in a quiet wash of color and music. Catherine Deneuve's breakthrough did not arrive through scandal, controversy, or loud ambition. It arrived softly, almost shyly, the way she herself often moved through the world. In 1964, when she was just 20 years old, a single film shifted the course of her life forever. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg did not merely introduce her to the world, it fixed her image into cinematic history. Before that moment, Catherine was still searching. She had appeared in several films, learning discipline and patience, absorbing the rhythms of sets and scripts. She was working steadily, but without distinction. In an industry that demanded immediate brilliance, she was considered pleasant, pretty, capable. No one yet saw the quiet gravity behind her eyes, or the emotional restraint that would soon become her signature. She was still proving to herself that she belonged. Then came Jacques Demy. Demy was not looking for a traditional star. He was searching for a presence that could hold longing without exaggeration, sorrow without spectacle. When Catherine was cast as Geneviève, a young woman caught between love and fate, something aligned perfectly. The role did not ask her to perform emotion in obvious ways. It asked her to contain it, to let silence speak, to let sadness rest just beneath the surface. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg was unlike anything audiences had seen. A love story told entirely through song, painted in bold pastels, drenched in melancholy. And at its center was Catherine Deneuve, her face luminous yet restrained, her voice carrying innocence and inevitability all at once. She did not dominate the screen through force, she haunted it through stillness. The film became an international sensation. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, a rare honor that instantly elevated everyone involved. Overnight, Catherine was no longer simply a young French actress. She became a symbol of a new kind of beauty, cool, distant, modern. The world fell in love not just with her face, but with the mystery she carried so effortlessly. What made her breakthrough so powerful was what it refused to give away. Catherine did not explain herself. She did not overshare. Audiences projected their own feelings onto her, their own heartbreaks and longings. She became a mirror rather than a confession. In an era that often celebrated excess, she offered restraint, and it felt revolutionary. With success came opportunity, but also expectation. Suddenly, directors wanted that same quiet sadness, that same porcelain composure. The industry began shaping an image around her, one she would spend decades both using and resisting. She was praised for being enigmatic, but rarely asked how it felt to carry that label. Fame arrived swiftly, but understanding did not. Privately, the transformation was overwhelming. Catherine was still young, still unsure of herself, still carrying the emotional distance of her upbringing. Yet she was now being watched, analyzed, admired. The world assumed confidence, while she was still learning how to stand firmly inside her own life. The contrast between the poised woman on screen and the uncertain young woman off it grew sharper. Her breakthrough did not come with triumph alone. It came with pressure, the knowledge that one role could define you forever, that beauty could become both a gift and a cage, that success could arrive before emotional readiness. And yet, she did not run from it. She stepped forward, choosing complexity over comfort. Rather than repeat herself, Catherine sought roles that challenged her image, that deepened rather than diluted her artistry. The breakthrough gave her a platform, but it was her choices that turned it into a legacy. The Umbrellas of Cherbourg did more than make Catherine Deneuve famous. It revealed the power of understatement in cinema. It proved that emotion could whisper and still devastate. And it marked the moment when a quiet young woman, shaped by absence and restraint, became one of the most enduring faces in film history. From that moment on, Catherine Deneuve was no longer searching for a place in cinema. Cinema was reshaping itself around her.
Peak career and achievements. After her breakthrough, Catherine Deneuve entered a period that would define not only her career, but an entire era of cinema. The late 1960s and 1970s became her golden years, a time when she moved with quiet authority through film after film, reshaping what it meant to be a leading woman.
While others chased visibility, she chose depth. While many stars sought admiration, she pursued meaning. Her collaborations during this period read like a map of European cinema at its most daring. With Roman Polanski in Repulsion, she shattered the fragile romantic image the world had begun to associate with her. The film demanded psychological exposure, fear, and disintegration. Catherine delivered a performance stripped of charm, exposing terror and isolation with unsettling honesty. Audiences were forced to confront a new truth. Behind the elegance was an actress unafraid of darkness. Then came Belle de Jour, directed by Luis Buñuel, a role that cemented her as a cinematic icon. Playing a woman who lives a secret life, Catherine balanced innocence and transgression without judgment or explanation. She did not tell the audience how to feel. She trusted them to sit with discomfort. The film became legendary, and so did she. It confirmed her willingness to inhabit contradiction, to exist between purity and desire, strength and vulnerability. Throughout these years, Catherine worked relentlessly, crossing borders and languages. She became one of the rare actresses equally respected in art cinema and mainstream film. From Truffaut to Buñuel, from Hollywood productions to deeply personal European stories, she built a body of work marked by intelligence and restraint. Each role added a layer, never repeating, never diluting. Awards followed, but they were never the center of her identity. César nominations, international honors, lifetime recognitions arrived steadily, yet Catherine seemed almost detached from them. Her real achievement was consistency. Decade after decade, she remained relevant without surrendering her principles. She did not chase youth. She did not beg for reinvention. She evolved naturally, allowing time to shape her performances rather than erase her. At her peak, Catherine Deneuve was not just a star, she was a standard. Directors trusted her silence. Audiences trusted her truth. She redefined femininity on screen, showing that power could be quiet, that beauty could be thoughtful, and that presence did not require explanation. This era solidified her legacy, but it also deepened the divide between her public image and her private self. The world celebrated her composure, unaware of the emotional cost of carrying perfection so easily.
Personal life and challenges. Behind the elegance and control that defined her screen presence, Catherine Deneuve lived a life shaped by emotional distance, complexity, and quiet struggle. Fame magnified her image, but it did not soften her inner world. If anything, it made solitude more visible. Catherine was fiercely private, not out of mystery, but out of necessity. She learned early that emotional exposure carried risk. Relationships were deeply felt but rarely uncomplicated. She loved intensely, yet guarded herself carefully. Her romances, often public, were dissected by the media, while her inner reality remained largely untouched by public understanding. Motherhood became one of the most grounding forces in her life, yet even that role existed with intention. Balancing an intense career with personal responsibility was never simple. She refused to abandon her work, but she also refused to pretend the balance came easily. Guilt, exhaustion, and emotional conflict quietly accompanied her success. The pressure of being a symbol weighed heavily. Catherine was celebrated for her beauty long before her humanity. Aging, for an actress whose image had been frozen in youth, became a silent battle. She resisted the industry's cruelty by refusing to apologize for time passing. Still, the awareness lingered. Each role came with unspoken questions about relevance, desirability, and worth.
Health challenges later in life reminded her of vulnerability in ways fame never could. A stroke in 2019 brought her face to face with mortality, forcing a pause she had rarely allowed herself. Recovery was slow, humbling, and deeply private. It was a moment when strength no longer meant endurance, but acceptance. Emotionally, Catherine carried the burden of being misunderstood. Her reserve was often mistaken for coldness, her silence for arrogance. Few recognized it as self-protection. Few understood that restraint was how she survived an industry that consumes openness. Behind the spotlight, Catherine Deneuve faced battles no award could heal. Loneliness, pressure, fear of loss, and the quiet ache of time passing were companions she never publicly dramatized. She lived them quietly, with dignity, allowing her work to speak where words could not. Her personal life did not contradict her artistry, it shaped it. Every restrained performance, every measured pause, carried the weight of a woman who had learned that survival sometimes means not revealing everything. And in that restraint, she found her truth.
Later years. Decline. As Catherine Deneuve moved into the later chapters of her life, the industry that once celebrated her flawless stillness began to change around her. Cinema grew louder, faster, less patient with silence. Youth became a currency more aggressively traded, and the space for aging women narrowed. Yet Catherine did not retreat. She adapted, not by chasing relevance, but by redefining it on her own terms. The roles became fewer, but they grew heavier. She chose characters shaped by memory, regret, and endurance. Women who had lived long enough to carry loss in their posture. Mothers with complicated histories, lovers haunted by what had passed rather than what was possible. These performances lacked the glamour of her early years, but they carried a deeper truth. Time had etched meaning into her face, and she allowed the camera to witness it. Public perception shifted subtly. The media, once obsessed with her beauty, now spoke of her legacy. Praise came with nostalgia, sometimes bordering on erasure. There is a quiet cruelty in being admired mostly for what you were, rather than what you still are. Catherine felt this shift, even if she rarely acknowledged it. Aging in the public eye is a slow disappearance, disguised as respect. Then came the physical reminder that no strength is permanent. In 2019, Catherine suffered a stroke while filming. The news shocked the world. For someone who had embodied control for decades, vulnerability now arrived without warning. Recovery forced stillness of a different kind. This was not the chosen silence of performance, but the imposed quiet of healing. For the first time, stepping away was not artistic, it was necessary. The experience reshaped her relationship with work, with time, with her own body. It was a confrontation with limits she had long outrun. Though she recovered, the incident marked a clear threshold. The pace slowed. The curtain began to lower. Yet, even in this period, Catherine never allowed decline to define her. She remained selective, present, dignified. She did not dramatize aging or illness. She simply continued being, with the same restraint that had always guided her. If fame had faded in brightness, it deepened in meaning. The later years were not a fall, they were a narrowing, a quiet acceptance that life, like cinema, must eventually soften its light.
Legacy and symbolism. Today, Catherine Deneuve stands as far more than a celebrated actress. She is a symbol of endurance, complexity, and quiet rebellion. In an industry that often demands explanation, she taught the power of withholding. In a culture obsessed with visibility, she proved that mystery could be strength.
Her legacy is not confined to awards or iconic roles, though she has many. It lives in the way she reshaped femininity on screen. She showed that women did not need to be loud to be powerful, emotional to be deep, or young to be relevant. Her performances invited audiences to sit with ambiguity, to feel without being guided, to listen to silence as carefully as dialogue. Generations of actresses cite her not just as inspiration, but as permission. Permission to age without apology. Permission to refuse categorization. Permission to exist beyond expectation. Catherine Deneuve did not chase trends. She outlasted them. She represents a bridge between eras, from the poetic romanticism of post-war European cinema to the sharper psychological explorations of later decades. She remained present without losing herself. Few artists manage that balance. Fewer still do it with such restraint. Her story reminds us that success does not always roar. Sometimes it endures quietly. That resilience can be elegant. That control can coexist with vulnerability. And that true influence often reveals itself not in applause, but in absence, when the world realizes how deeply a presence has shaped it. Even today, Catherine Deneuve remains a symbol of thoughtful strength, a reminder that artistry does not fade with time, it transforms. And through her life and work, she leaves behind a lesson both simple and profound. There is power in stillness. There is truth in restraint. And sometimes the most enduring voices are the ones that speak the least.
Closing statement. Catherine Deneuve's story is not one of easy triumph or simple brilliance. It is a story shaped by restraint, endurance, and the quiet courage to remain oneself in a world that constantly demands reinvention. When we look back at her life, what emerges most clearly is not just a succession of iconic films, but a woman who moved through decades of fame without surrendering her inner compass. From the beginning, Catherine was never chasing the spotlight. The spotlight found her, followed her, and at times pressed heavily against her. She learned early that fame does not fill emotional gaps, that applause cannot replace understanding, that beauty, when endlessly observed, can become isolating rather than affirming. Yet she did not rebel loudly against these truths. She absorbed them, carried them, and allowed them to inform her art. Her performances were never pleas for approval. They were offerings of presence. She trusted silence. She trusted stillness. She trusted the intelligence of the audience to meet her halfway. In doing so, she challenged the very mechanics of stardom. She proved that an actress could be distant without being cold, reserved without being empty, and admired without being consumed. As the years passed, Catherine faced what every artist eventually must: the slow recalibration of identity, the realization that the roles change, the gaze shifts, and the body no longer responds with the same certainty it once did. For many, this moment brings bitterness or retreat. For her, it brought reflection. She did not cling to youth or deny time. She allowed herself to be shaped by it, to let age deepen rather than diminish her presence. Her life reminds us that strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers through consistency, through the refusal to compromise inner values, through the courage to remain complex in a culture that prefers simplicity. Catherine Deneuve never explained herself to the world, and that may be her greatest act of self-respect. When the camera eventually pulls away, what remains is not just an image, but an atmosphere, a way of being, a legacy that teaches us something quietly profound,
that identity is not performance, that privacy can coexist with public life, that one can be deeply seen without revealing everything. Catherine's story is not just one of success, but of human truth. It is the story of a woman who understood that survival, in art and in life, often means knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. A reminder that even legends are shaped by vulnerability, by time, by doubt, and by choice. In the end, Catherine Deneuve stands not as a myth, but as a mirror, reflecting back the enduring truth that grace is not perfection, it is endurance. It is self-knowledge. It is the quiet decision made again and again to remain whole in a world that would gladly break you into pieces. And that is why her story lingers, not because it dazzles endlessly, but because it stays.